Well, welcome everyone. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Our topic is sustainably reimagining the life cycle of mixed plastic waste. I know I was going to trip up on that one, Bob. So my name is Jeff Dewitt, and I'm part of the Bureau Veritas North American leadership team. And today I'm joined by Bob Powell, CEO and founder of Brightmark. Welcome, Bob, and thank you for joining.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I'm delighted to be here in front of our nice warm fire here.
Ready to toast marshmallows or drink some brandy or something?
I'm ready. Let's talk about reimagining waste and toasting marshmallows all at the same time.
Sounds good. So over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to learn more about how Brightmark is, reimagining the life cycle of mixed plastic waste. And with a society that has a nearly insatiable appetite for plastics, the need for waste recycling solutions has never been greater. And Brightmark is on the forefront in addressing this challenge head on. And Bob here is the visionary that's leading this charge. So what I'd like to do is just, a public service announcement here before we get started. We're intending to facilitate some time for questions. So anybody who does have any questions, please enter those into the Q&A section of the meeting, and we'll try to get to those as we can. So anyways, ready to get started. So, Bob, I think the easiest way to get started is, is learning a little more about your journey that led you to Brightmark, because, after meeting you, it's more than just a journey, it's almost a mission for you. And I think it'd be great to hear some of the backstory behind that journey.
Jeff, I mean, you're exactly right. It is more than just an occupation. In terms of back level set, some of the folks here that have joined us, I've spent 30 years in the energy industry, and a lot of the earlier years were the formative years that brought me and us at Brightmark to this moment where we believe we're solving some really important environmental issues. So the journey itself, with energy companies, consulting with them about how to purchase, acquire, build globally different types of energy assets. A lot of power generation assets were part of that. And early on in my career, I go back to sort of the mid-90s. And in the mid-90s, not having traveled a lot, I had the good fortune to spend time in Asia as part of a very large acquisition. And we were looking at some of the power generation assets in Asia, landed in Jakarta. And this was 95. And this was about the time where my son, Sean, my oldest, was 5 years old. And as I was traveling to the hotel, I noticed that kids were playing in open sewers, and there was a lot of waste and garbage just piled up. Kids were having a great time playing, but it began to have a really profound impact on me. And I would say that was sort of the kernel of what helped me drive toward a passion toward eliminating waste and creating cleaner solutions with energy content and other types of solutions as well. So as we continue on in my life cycle in the energy industry, I used to look environmental reports for different types of power plant assets, coal-fired generation, and saw the environmental impacts. And so for me, as I then transitioned from a consultant inside companies, had a great opportunity to ultimately become the CFO at Pacific Gas and Electric Company, right at the time we were starting the whole renewable solar and wind really revolution that took place. And that spurred me to the first company where I actually took over and ran, which was one of the early solar developers. So for me, as I think about the moment that brought us to Brightmark, there were a lot of personal observations, thinking about my children and the world they were growing up in and other children, and then just seeing how we could do things better. So 4 years ago, we created Brightmark, and was for us to be very mission-based and a company that had the culture and values that I really wanted to have early, mid, or later in my career. And for us, what we wanted to solve was this issue of waste and cleaner energy. So our mission in solving these profound environmental solutions was something that I felt like we should and could do and impact globally. So now I'm going to be very specific about how do we do that at Brightmark. So our goal is to eliminate waste and reuse our resources by creating circular solutions. So in eliminating waste, we currently have two primary ways that we do that. We divert plastic from landfills and waterways, and we also harvest manure that creates methane and also releases nitrogen, phosphorus into the waterways and water tables. So those are the two ways that we eliminate waste, and then reuse our resources by doing three predominant things. One, which we'll talk more about, is turning plastic waste back into plastics, transportation fuels, and waxes. And then the other is turning methane into renewable natural gas, and also by turning solids from manures into more environmentally friendly fertilizer and clean water. Those are three very specific ways that we're tackling this waste problem at Brightmark.
You know, it's interesting. You talked about the trigger point being, you know, traveling the world and seeing the beaches, and I remember about the same time frame. My oldest is about the same age as yours, you know, roughly in the 90s, and seeing the pictures, you know, of places, and then visiting them firsthand, and it does kind of give you a different perspective to look at, you know, at the amount of waste, you know, and we've all seen the pictures of the floating island of waste in the Pacific and so forth, and then to think, you know, that our children are going to be inheriting that. And you know, I find it admirable for anybody, you know, like yourself, who takes on that mission of you know, addressing that problem for future generations. And it's kind of tough to look at your 5-year-old and say, you know what, there's nothing I can do about this. And again, I admire someone who's taken on that challenge. You know, one of the things that I'm curious about is, you know, your history started in energy, and your company actually started with, you know, under the name of Brightmark Energy, and you rebranded not too long ago. So I'm assuming, you know, since your original inception, you know, about 5 years ago, you know, things have changed and they've evolved from what your initial vision was. Kind of how has that come about?
Yeah, Jeff, that's a really good observation. You're absolutely right. When we started Brightmark, we were called Brightmark Energy. And initially, what we thought we would tackle would be two things. One was continue some of the renewable energy work that not just myself, the team members that were assembled had previously done in the form of solar and wind. And then also take projects that were predominantly around renewable natural gas and create sort of combined heat and power solutions. So what we found is as we went through the journey at Brightmark was a couple of things. One, solar and wind still continues, and we're so passionate about that as well, still continues to power through, and there's so many great teams tackling that. What we wanted to do was find a spot where we could be or have the greatest leverage and impact on the world. So with solar and wind being very well addressed, we moved away from that. And so we looked at what could we do with renewable natural gas that came out of waste streams. And as we begun to develop our strategy around that, what we'd found was, and I've always had this view around waste, but there's more to this than just simply creating energy content. And in the renewable natural gas solutions that we now have spent over 3 years investing in, not only is it, as I said before, about capturing methane and creating negative carbon renewable natural gas, there's also a broader impact, which is the nutrients that are in manure can create contamination in waterways and actually algae blooms and that type of thing. So in the process of creating that energy content, there are other great things we can do. So we manage the resources better, and we also have an ability, going back to, if you think about my trip to Indonesia, the water, to actually clean the water as part of the process. So we saw what we were tackling as being more broad than just simply energy. And then as we got into and we invested in the technology on the plastic renewal side, we saw that not only did we have the opportunity to pull plastics out of the environment and create transportation fuels, we could create circularity by actually remaking those back into plastics, a non-energy solution. So we found that we're broader around waste, and the solutions we provide are more than energy content. So dropping energy as a result of our evolving strategy, it just made a lot of sense for us.
And it aligns with your, your mission, it's and your passion, which is looking at taking the problem, which is, the methane, or taking a look at the plastics, and it's solving the problem in creative ways. So you're not just looking at a one-dimensional solution of energy, but I love the whole circular nature of, your approach to this, saying, okay, let's take this pile, if you will, whether it be manure or plastic, and let's see what can we do to create and make a better environment, reuse this, redeploy it, and so forth. So I think that's a phenomenal, approach, and it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think that's really well put, Jeff. And I think circularity is absolutely where we need to head. I mean, you mentioned the ocean gyres of plastics. I think there's two large ones that people commonly talk about. Well, if we have a circular solution, we can totally eliminate that. And part of it is around having a solution, but an economic solution, so that in this case, the plastics don't end up out in the environment because we've created value out of remaking plastics. The incentives are there for people to bring them back to us, almost like the old days when we had the Coke bottles, if you remember, where there's a deposit on it, you got money for it, and people were incented to bring them back. So by creating these economic, more broad solutions that are circular in nature, I think that we have this opportunity to stop dead in the tracks. Things like by 2050, it's predicted there'll be as much plastics by weight in the ocean as marine life. And circularity is absolutely the way to go.
And I find it interesting, in the, in creating the circularity, your offshoot actually is the energy, because you're able to, to take the, particularly in the plastics situation where, your circular is you're recycling those plastics and being able to reintroduce them back in. Oh, by the way, you're able to also capture the fuels and other, composites that, create, the original waste that you're recycling.
Yeah, that's right. And we see two elements. I mentioned them a little bit briefly at the top here, which is circularity is at least two things, right? Which one is eliminating the waste and then reusing our resources, so that you've got that virtuous circle that it supports itself with enablers like our technology, and also the economic nature of our technology that really supports the long-term sustainability around circular sustainability.
Oh yeah, well, and the other thing that's I think find impressive is on your renewable natural gas initiatives. You've grown that very rapidly. You're making an impact in the large farming communities and so forth. And you're giving them some attention on what can we do with this. It's a situation where it's not their primary business, but it is a problem that's a result of their business.
Well, it is a problem that's a result of their business. I do have to say, what's really exciting now is the farming communities, having spent a lot of time with the farming communities, are also, and frankly, have always been sustainable. But those of us that live in large cities didn't actually really notice that. But they're putting their commitments into this as well. So, for example, earlier this year, the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairies set new environmental stewardship goals, which was basically by 2050 for dairies to become carbon neutral or better, to optimize water use while maximize the whole circular recycling nature, and to improve water quality by enhancing use of manure and nutrients. Square in what we're doing, but there's a commitment from the farming communities, and we work mostly at this point in time with dairy farmers, and so they're fully committed to sustainability. And if folks have an opportunity to spend time on farms, if those farms are not sustainable, they will not continue. So they really understand, they're on the ground with that. So it's pretty exciting as well.
Yeah, growing up a country boy, you learn to reuse anything and everything. You know, there was nothing that went to waste. You know, every piece of wood that you know could be reused in one way or another. Every nail that could be salvaged. So obviously it's a community that's built on that as a foundation. But you know, absolutely introducing some additional technology to assist them with, you know, even greater, you know, accomplishments, like you said, in manage this is admirable to see and wonderful to see.
Well, thanks. And on that part of it, the great thing about what we're doing on that part of the business, and we'll talk about plastics here in a second, because we've partnered with Bureau Veritas on that side of our business. But one of the really exciting things about that is those manure projects are the highest negative carbon solutions we have in creating fuels. So if you would like to have a net carbon zero future, solutions like these renewable natural gas solutions using manures are the most powerful to really get us to that future. And a lot of folks don't even realize that solar and wind, which, as I said, I'm very passionate about, are actually slightly carbon positive. So you need negatives to add to positives in order to get to a zero carbon future. And that's one of the great exciting things about that part of our business.
Yep. So switching up, you're actually kind of teeing up the next topic, which is moving from the renewables to the plastics, and obviously, you know, you've you know, your renewables, you've started the journey, and you so have as well with the plastics, and you know, you're currently in the process of bringing online your first facility in Ashley, Indiana, where you're not just looking at the typical, you know, plastics recycling that most are familiar with, but the whole spectrum. So tell us a little bit about that project and where you're going, and what are the products and so forth that are coming out of that? What are you learning?
Well, first, it's really exciting, super exciting. So what we're doing is, well, first off, let's just start with what it is we created 15 years ago, and that is the original inventors. 15 years ago, utilizing a process known as pyrolysis, which has been around a long time. Charcoal is created from pyrolysis, right? Oxygen-starved environment. But what the original inventors of our patented technology and IP as well were able to figure out was how to take plastics, heat in large stainless steel vessels, and do it in a very elegant way so that we can continuously operate and operate at a very low cost, so that there's the economic sustainability aspect associated with that. And also equally as interesting, and thirdly, is to take all the mixed array of plastic waste. Many of us are familiar with the water bottles, the laundry detergent bottles, etc., wraps. You'll see the numbering system on there, and we number plastics numbers 1, which is the water bottles typically, all the way up through the number 7. Our technology is actually able to take all the 1s through 7s and turn them into usable products. Jeff, you mentioned that there were some plastics are actually recycled. Only 9%, both in the States and generally globally, are we able to recycle plastics, and that's utilizing mechanical recycling. So maybe you've seen the tennis shoes made out of plastics, the bracelets, etc. We're actually able to tackle the remaining amount, that 91%, through our process. So with the invention and proving it at a large scale and continuously, we then, as we start rolling out the technology, found a great community in Indiana, in Northeast Indiana, Ashley, Indiana, where we started in April of 2019 with a financing package where we issued green bonds, 185 million, and the remaining in our own equity, for a total of about $260 million investment in a first of its kind facility where we will, when we're up and running in first quarter next year, take annually 100,000 tons of that mixed array of plastics and create usable products out of the plastics. So what are the products? Transportation fuels, which would be ultra low sulfur diesel, very environmentally friendly, and then naphtha, which can be used for gasoline, but actually is also the feedstock necessary to remake plastics. And then we create waxes as well out of our process. You could imagine paraffin waxes. Maybe you could have an
Bob, I think we lost your audio there for a second.
Sorry about that. Are we back now?
Yes, you are. Yep. Sorry.
Okay.
Just you
Yeah.
finished with wax, and then I think we lost your audio at that point.
Right. I was highlighting on the fact that you could use our waxes to have a Brightmark candle in a home. And so those are the predominant products that we use. We actually create gas that we use to feed back into the system to make it much more energy efficient. So those are the primary products. And then as we go forward in the future, you can expect more of our Brightmark plastic renewal projects here in the States and internationally as well. And we certainly have more details that we could share with folks later, but we're in the process of selecting the next set of sites here in the US. And I think early next year, you'll hear about the next set of sites beyond Ashley, Indiana.
So how is the Ashley, Indiana project? As I mentioned, I get a weekly update, and I keep hearing of all the progress. And your target is 2021 to have that operational. How are things going?
It's going great. As we started our construction this year, we really got into sort of that moment and process and construction where we could start testing different elements of our process. For example, the feedstock preparation system, where we take bales of plastics or large containers of plastics, shred, sort, pelletize them. Early on in the summer, we started to prove that out, and we've learned a lot through that and the rest of the process. So that's gone quite well, and most of that is actually complete. And we're in the process now of the part of the equipment where I said we put the plastics, it's plastic pellets that we create into the stainless steel vessels, in the process now of fine-tuning that process. And then ultimately the back end, which is refining equipment, to take what we produce out of the vessels and turn them into the usable products. We're progressing extremely well. And as I said, we expect to be at full production scale by first quarter of next year, 21.
One of the things that I've heard is, there's claims about the renewable fuel products helping to reduce emissions over traditional fuels, both in the production of the fuel and in its use. Can you talk a little bit about how that happens or how that occurs?
Sure, happy to do that. So what we need to consider is a few things. One, what is the current state with respect to plastic? So forgetting the fact that we're going to be pulling plastics out of the environment, which has in and of itself a tremendous environmental positive or good associated with that. Also, if you compare our products to the current state, so as plastics are made, they are generally made from crude oil or natural gas that comes out of the ground. And as wells are poked in the ground, if you will, there are a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of methane that escapes as part of the process of extracting crude oil and then natural gas out of the ground. And then there's a transportation system to get to the refineries as well. Our process eliminates a significant amount of the emissions in that current state. So there's an environmental benefit associated with that. And so even though some of our products are transportation fuels, if you ultimately look at traditional way versus our way of doing it, our plastic renewal process, there is much less greenhouse gas impact to the environment relative to the crude oil and the natural gas wells. And then if you look at what ultimately we are maximizing is true circularity around plastics, you also have the same impact. Plastics are made from crude oil, natural gas, you're offsetting that. Now you're not burning it to the extent our products are turned back into plastics. There's a tremendous, even larger greenhouse gas positive impact associated with that. So those are the two primary ways of looking at what it is we produce.
Actually, I'm going to leave someone actually has a question about I was going to interject here rather than hold, and they're asking what percentage of naphtha production do you expect will go towards making new plastics?
Well, what we hope is ultimately 100% of the naphtha will be used to remake plastics. It is a journey because as we're the first of its kind to start a production scale facility like this, there's an infrastructure that needs to be created in order for us to first have customers who believe that we're going to operate continuously. And thankfully, we have a great customer in British Petroleum, BP, who will take all the fuels out of Ashley. But then with that, with the dependable proving that Ashley and our other facilities operate at a large scale, then we're able to engage with the petrochems, which we're already talking with, both together and separately from BP, in order to maximize and create, again, our goal would be 100% of that naphtha stream would be used to remake plastics, and potentially the gases that come off of our system as well, that we currently feed back in from an energy efficiency standpoint to heat the vessels up. We can actually also use that gas stream to remake plastics. So that's the goal, 100% of that eligible stream, and then potentially the gases we produce as well to remake plastics.
Yeah, very good. So one question I always have is, what's been the technological breakthrough, or has it not been? You started talking about pyrolysis being around for a long time, but why is it that now you're able to do this when it, is it a function of the problem wasn't being addressed before, or is there some technological breakthroughs that have facilitated being able to employ or deploy these processes that you've got?
Well, 15 years ago, the breakthrough occurred, excuse me. And that was, and I mentioned a little bit of this before, one, to operate continuously. Some of the even current types of technologies with pyrolysis require folks to stop, open up these vessels and clean them. So the original inventors had a very elegant solution, patented solution around how you progress and how you process the plastics so that you don't have to stop for very long periods of time. Of course, you have to do regular maintenance, but you don't have to stop the process. So it operates continuously. Excuse me again. So that's one, and that was really important because that allows you to have more uptime, which means for your investment, you get a greater return of products. So that was part of it as well. And the other part is they figured out, part patented and part from an IP perspective, how you operate in a way that you can take all the plastics. Extremely powerful. There's some solutions that are single streams, like a polystyrene type of solution, which is, large volume, but it doesn't solve the whole problem. They figure out how to solve the whole problem and operate it continuously. So low cost, high volume, in a way that folks just hadn't done before.
Well, and obviously, if you're able to address all of those things, the circularity that you were talking about becomes, is enabled because you make it something that, from a cost standpoint, allows it to continue to go through. So, I mean, it's not just, it's one thing starting with the mission of reducing the amount of waste, but another where you're able to make it economical enough to where the solution, generates or the circularity.
Yeah, and that's right. I think, Jeff, what you're touching on is there's a lot of great potential answers and solutions out there. What we are is we're the sort of practical application of the theory. There's tremendous, and as we investigated solutions, we weren't sure we were going to find a solution to the plastic problem here. And ultimately, what we need is what you just said, is solutions that sound good, but actually really work on the ground. Because we're going to drive change, we actually need to do things. And the things we're doing is creating usable products out of the plastics that we throw away and currently en masse just don't have value. That's why they're in the oceans. That's why they're in the landfills and all over the place.
One of the questions I have, and maybe you've already addressed it, is, obviously, your feedstock is a critical component, where you're getting that, how you're getting it, the form and so forth. Have you been able to engage with your supply base to make sure that there's full alignment of, the feedstock that's coming in so that you're able to process it and manage it and so forth to get the optimum output?
We are, in fact, it's just astounding what's happened here. So as we started, Ashley, we have a really good area, which is around Indianapolis, Detroit, and then the suburbs of Chicago. Tremendous amount of plastic waste there. There's great partners that we have and folks that are integrating with the MRFs to help us bring the plastics. And so as we started, Ashley, we had a sizable potential oversupply relative to what we needed in the first phase of Ashley there. Now, what's really cool is earlier this year, as we looked at, and we publicly announced we were looking at the eastern half of the US to build our next set of plastic renewal facilities. Part of that process, the RFP process to select the sites, was also an RFP around achieving over I think it was 1.2 million annual tons of plastics a year. So we issued an open call. And I will tell you that both on the sites and then what you're asking about, which is the supply of plastics from the MRFs, there's very specialized streams as well. We have received hundreds of communities who said, I want you to be here, and hundreds of suppliers, waste management companies, et cetera, who have raised their hand and said, we want to work with you. So it actually is something that we thought would happen, but absolutely has happened. And that is, there's so many plastics out there, so many folks that really want to seek a better end of use, or in this case, circular use for the plastics that we all throw away. So amazing in terms of what we've seen there.
I mean, it's literally the old adage, it takes a village, in any business model, it does take the entire supply chain, and, not just, upstream from you, but even downstream, and hearing about, your alignments with BP and others, I'm sure that getting everybody on board, it's obviously a mission that many people are interested in and passionate about as well. So, and not completely surprising that you got alignment, but you're also dealing with, challenges of different organizations and personalities and cultures. So, it's great to hear that you are getting that collaboration.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It takes a lot of great partners to help make this happen. And I 100% agree. I actually say the same thing all the time. It definitely takes a village to make this happen, whether it be on the supply, the offtake, or as you're constructing and doing the different things that you need to in order to run facilities like this. And it is definitely a problem that we've needed a solution to. And now that folks see that it's possible, that the art of the possible is there, they're coming to join the village here, which includes certainly you folks as well at Bureau Veritas.
I was going to say that we feel we're a small part of it, but somebody who's on the journey with you. So, if you could maybe speak to the process for selecting partners like Bureau Veritas, and obviously there are many companies out there who proclaim to be on a mission for sustainability and improving the world around them. Obviously, at Bureau Veritas, that's a very core belief and value for us. But it's always nice to hear what's the thought process from the other side, in selecting a partner like ourselves.
Sure. So in order to create sustainability, sustainability implies something that sustains, is longer term. And so for us, the partners that we seek are ones that are not per se transactional, but are more relationship oriented and have the ability on a long-term basis to work together with us so that we can be successful. And in the case of Bureau Veritas, what we saw was first an agreement as to the mission that we're seeking here, which is sustainability, and in the case of plastic renewal, solving that environmental problem, and having a long-term view, which I think BV certainly does have, and the ability then to deliver on a long-term basis. So one of the great things as we go globally is we know that with your team and your firm, that you've got a global scale, so that as we're in Asia, where most of the plastic ocean problem actually is created from there in Africa as well, you're going to be there with us, in Europe and other places. So that there's that scale and scope associated with it. Your specific solutions in terms of helping us sort of test, verify, and frankly provide an independence that others can have a level of assurance around is also a determinative factor for us. So your competence in this case, and others as well, is extremely important to us. So scale, well, mission, agreement with that, scale, and then the competence factor, and then a view of how do we integrate together and work well, because your team is part of our operations there as we run our test labs and look at all the results and samples that others need to rely on, and you're there with us actually working day in and day out, helping us make that happen. So those are some of the elements to me that are really important. And I would say one other thing to note is, for us, one of our important values we celebrate is diversity and inclusion. At Brightmark, I was really excited to find out that the CEO, at least here in North America and the States, is a gal who's a tremendous professional, and really excited to see some of the other elements of our culture and value celebrated with Bureau Veritas as well.
You know, and that's one of the things that's excited us since we started the engagement with Brightmark, is that alignment of mission. Because, you know, you're absolutely right. If the two missions aren't aligned, you know, you're not going to get the success. You're not going to get the benefits of the mutuality of the relationship and the melding of the minds and so forth. And as I mentioned, you know, I get a weekly update on how things are progressing in Ashley, and you know, we're excited on, you know, what more we can contribute and what more we can help with the journey. And we see the benefits, and we see, you know, part of the mission is seeing the need and the demand. And like you said, this is something that's a global demand. In fact, you know, one of the things that I'm curious about is, you know, where do you see this going and growing? You obviously talked about, you know, your start here in the Midwest. You've got the expansion in the East. Where do you see this going in the next 5 years?
Where I say going in the next 5 years is you'll see additional sites here located in North America. And then what you will see is both in developed Europe in particular, we have efforts going on, and then developing areas as well of Asia. In particular, you'll see additional facilities here that we would stand up, invest in, and ultimately get operational, so that we can meet our long-term goals around pulling both greenhouse gases out of the environment, in addition to millions of tons of plastics out of the environment as well. So you'll see us growing globally for sure. So.
And I think recently I saw that, you know, you've even, you know, put a number to that with your objectives, you know, where you're hoping, what you're hoping to achieve in processing. Is that something you could share with us, what your targets are and what your, you know, the goals are pretty aggressive, but you know, obviously you're on you're well on your way to achieving them.
Right. So we expect to achieve within 5 years over 8 million tons of plastics cumulatively pulled out of the environment, and about 22 million cumulative CO2 equivalent tons pulled out of the environment as well from a greenhouse gas perspective.
Again, very, very admirable goals, and that's huge impact to the planet. You know, every part, you know, everyone, you know, every bit helps, but obviously these are substantial goals that will make a significant impact, which I think is back to, you know, like I was saying at the beginning, you know, this is more than just a job; it's a mission for you.
It is a mission for us, and I think part of the mission is well demonstrating to folks that we're actually getting this done. I know there's some questions about some of
Yeah.
these things as well from a chat perspective. And I see one vein of questions that I'd like to address. I think some folks are
Yeah.
asking for some of the accounting around and even case studies around what it is we're doing at Brightmark. You know, this was set up as a fireside chat, but what a couple things I'd like to offer up in that vein. One would be that as it relates to pyrolysis in general, Argonne National Labs has put forth a study speaking to transportation fuels that are produced out of pyrolysis relative to transportation fuels with the baseline I talked before. 14% greenhouse gas improvement there. We actually are undertaking and would expect, you know, definitely in 21 to release our own sort of life cycle analysis, which should provide independent, demonstrable numbers and information around that as well. So again, I think the format was a little bit different, but I want to make sure that folks know that we're about solving solutions here, and at the right times and the right settings, we're happy to share and be prepared for those kind of things. But I didn't want folks to think that this is something that we're not focused in on. So you can expect more from us with respect to that. Another stat that I didn't throw out is our process is 93% efficient. And so if you think about the inputs from tons of plastics and the usable outputs, 93% is the usable products, which we talked about, which also includes the gases. The remaining 7% is a solid inert residue. Some call it char, but in our case, it's landfillable. It does not have toxic waste associated with it. In fact, it can be used as a usable product to make bricks and clay, which we haven't chosen to do yet. So I hope you don't mind me addressing some of that there.
No, absolutely. I was going to say there's a number of questions starting to come in, and I'm glad you did address that. You know, and I think that's a good point to emphasize here. You know, is you're on the journey. You're not at the end of the journey. You know, with the renewable natural gas RNG, you know, you're a little further along. Obviously, with the recyclables on the plastic side of things, you know, you've already got proof of concept. Now you're doing scale. You know, and your objective of getting this, you know, within, launched and coming out of Ashley by 2021, you're still on target with that. So, and you know, I like the idea, you know, we were talking about earlier that, you know, you started as an energy company, but now you've become a solutions company, and what you're doing is addressing those components of the solution. I mean, it's almost you're taking an entity and breaking it down, and you've already got three identified paths, you know, and a fourth one that you're just now talking about with what's still the waste. You know, like anybody, you can't take them all on at once. You know, you've got to get the scale going.
Yeah, you know, it's a really good point. When you start on a journey, it is a journey, and in fact, I put out a monthly newsletter that folks can certainly take a look at on our website. One of the notions is that, quote, don't let perfect get in the way of good. This journey means that, you know, again, I'm currently not 100% circular. That's ultimately where I want to take this. But pragmatically, I need to just make sure I can economically begin to create an infrastructure, that village of folks. And then we will continue to refine what it is we do to that greater state of perfection there. So you're absolutely right. It's a journey that we're on. I do see a couple of questions here. I mean, it's up to you how you want to do this, but I see a few, like,
go ahead and please address. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's one that I get pretty typically, which is if you can take all types of plastics, anonymous attendee here, what happens with the chlorine coming from the PVC? Well, the great thing about taking the whole array of plastics is you have more risk tolerances. We could not take a 100% PVC stream. Those of you all are familiar with the chemistry know that chlorine can wreak havoc on things like stainless steel and then back-end refining equipment. We actually have high tolerance levels, which is in sort of that 8 to 9%. We could certainly take, and it would be allowed, certainly part of what we would deal with and do deal with in the hydro treating area. I will tell you, if we could avoid that chlorine, that would be fantastic. But I think for the foreseeable, we're going to have proportions of PVC that are out there. And again, we can take certainly some of it. We'll not single stream PVC at all. That's just not practical. Again, the power of taking a whole mixed array. It looks like Christelle here, if I have the pronunciation right, asked what type of certification do you plan to get? ISCC plus question mark. The answer is absolutely. What percentage of the product stream is naphtha? So at 100,000 tons of plastics a year, we produce 6 million gallons annually of waxes, the paraffin waxes we talked about, and then 18 million gallons of the usable liquids beyond sort of that heavier wax stream there. The naphtha is on a 2-to-1 proportion of that 18 million. So it gives you a sense of the proportion of the amount of naphtha that we currently produce. We can vary our output through different means to increase the proportion of naphtha that we produce. Again, this is one of the things, Jeff, you talked about, which is as we refine and create a more valuable use for that naphtha stream, we will increase the proportion of those. Some of these are a little bit long to read while, while we're on together. Yeah, so I was trying to see.
And actually, we did have one come in through the chat that was asking, how does a company connect and work with, be part of the work that both Bureau Veritas and Brightmark are doing, and obviously, you know, reach out to Bob or myself, and you know, you can connect with us through through our websites or through LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to talk to you about, you know, being a
absolutely. Yeah, and in the case of Brightmark, it's pretty simple. If you send an email to info@brightmark.com, we'd be happy. We actually look at those, believe it or not. There may be a point where the volume level gets so high, but we certainly have a team looking at those, and that's a great way to do that. And what's interesting is via that and a couple of other means like that, you mentioned LinkedIn, we've actually found great partners that we now work with who've said, hey, we want to be part of the solution here. Styrofoam is one of the questions. We take polystyrene in our process, and again, that's part of that stream. And there's a lot of styrofoam out there. So we take polystyrene and produce it through our process in order to create the usable products we talked about. So that's totally perfect. Works very well in our process.
See, what else do you see in the questions here, Bob? I want to make sure we get, like you said, some of them are a little long, so you know, jump in as you see another one.
Yeah, projected capacity factor of the Pioneer plant. I won't give exact quotes, but I will tell you it's well above 80% availability time. So, and that's part of the operating at a production scale continuously with regular maintenance. And regular maintenance, both planned and in some cases unplanned, is what we factor into that. And somebody hopes we're in Texas. I hope we're in Texas too. You might actually see some folks have leaked some information out there. Certainly Texas and Louisiana are great places. A lot of our team, myself included, have spent a lot of time in Texas working, and there's a lot of plastic out there. So you might even see one day soon an RNG facility there too.
Perfect. Okay, well, yeah, you know, there's still questions coming in, you know, but I want to make sure that I'm respectful. I know you've got a busy schedule, so, you know, I did want to give you just a minute here to see if you had anything more that you wanted to add or wrap up, you know, for the session.
Well, you know, again, what I would say is that we believe that we're truly on a mission to solve and eliminate waste. And we think we've got two great solutions, but as I said before, we can't do it alone. And there are other solutions beyond what we do, which include a reduction of use of waste, and we fully support that. Again, we hope that you'll find that the future is bright working with us at Brightmark. and that with some of you all have asked questions that you will know, because the proof is in the pudding, that we're solving this problem, not because we get on to a chat like this, but because you can actually see demonstrably both what we say and what you see at our facilities and what others independent of ourselves, like Bureau Veritas, have to say about what we're producing.
And I go back to, you know, the alignment on missions, you know, that you know, BV is a company, you know, where our mission is shaping a world of trust. We consider ourselves a business to society, you know, and we see that what you're doing at Brightmark, you know, is a major contribution to the improvement of society. So, you know, and we do very much value our partnership and our collaboration, and we look forward to continuing the journey with you.
Well, thanks, Jeff. We value the relationship with you and the BV team as well. And that's right, it's a journey, and we'll, I'm sure, be together many other times over the coming years here. And I really appreciate you and the audience for tuning in here. Can't get to all the questions, but we're here and happy to support and answer where we can and work with folks.
Absolutely. Well, I think we'll call it a wraps for today. So again, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, and want to thank everybody else who joined us today. Hope you learned something and found the information valuable. And again, as we mentioned, please feel free to contact us with additional questions or you know, other information you'd like to receive from either Brightmark or Bureau Veritas.